Um, Introductions. My name is Darren Ritchie. I am the event group lead for Jumps and Combined Events, and I'm also the project lead for the Junior Talent Programme. We've been, well, I suppose it's really been an interesting 12 months. We kind of looked to formalise this programme a little bit more following the Youth Talent Programme last year, but it was very much modified and tweaked just with COVID. So hopefully that is very much behind us. And we can crack on with more operational delivery. And this evening, I have the pleasure of having Jade Surman with us, who's the lead coordinator at Birmingham University. But Jade, I'll let you introduce yourself there.
Thank you. That title is a bit of a mouthful, so you've done half for me already. Yeah, evening everybody, welcome. So yeah, I kind of lead on the coordination of para athletics at the University of Birmingham. But I'm also a point of contact on the British Athletics Talent Hub as well, which incorporates a little bit of the Youth Talent Programme that I'm involved in as well.
And a little bit of background, I'm a former international athlete yourself. What was your event? Jumps, combined events, or a bit of both?
Yeah, it's a long time ago now. Yeah, so I used to be an international heptathlete. Kind of junior level, I had quite a bad knee injury when I was about 18, so that kind of cut short a little bit of my international career. I did make a short comeback and did a few indoor competitions as well, but yeah, heptathlon, favourite events, hurdles, long jump, but you've got to love them all. So now into my coaching, which is even more exciting.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, listen, great. Thanks for coming on. And we'll be covering a little bit more around some of the Talent Hub environment and what happens within that through the junior programme. And so Jade will give us more information on that. So in terms of agenda for this evening, I'm going to look at an overview and look at the objectives of the talent pathway and the programme. We're looking at delivery, what actually happens for those who are involved in the junior talent programme. As I just mentioned, we're going to cover a little bit more around the talent hubs, and they are very much integral to the operational delivery around creating that environment and the performance support services for athletes and coaches who are successful on the programme. We'll make sure that we cover eligibility and selection in terms of the criteria for getting onto the programme. And then this session will hopefully provide an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions to either Jade or myself. So without further ado, I'm going to switch off my camera so that you guys can actually see the presentation fully. This will be recorded and will be available later on our website for future reference. And for those, feel free to share the link in the presentation for anyone who's interested in the Junior Talent Programme. So I'm going to kick off, and I am going to switch off my camera. There we go, so we can get going. Okay, so introduction. So the Talent Pathway Programme is very much focused around supporting the athlete, not just as an athlete, but looking at that dual career athlete, ensuring that they fulfill their potential within the sport, but also sure that they actually take care of life after sport, whether it's through further education, employment. So it really prepares them for that. The talent pathway is to ensure that the journey and the athlete and coach reach its full potential. And I think there's been previous iterations of support where it's been primarily athlete focused, and then more recent years through the NCDB program, it was very much coach focused. But where we are now is very much that kind of sweet spot in the middle, where we recognize and acknowledge that it's about the development of the athlete and coach, that partnership reaches its potential. And the talent pathway is there to support that coach and athlete as best as it can. The talent athlete and coach pathway provides progressive support structure, but also opportunities and experiences for athletes to develop those skills and competencies. And we hope ultimately Athletes will then will go on to represent their country in England in the Commonwealth Games or at GB level, whether it's through age groups or at senior level. Where the junior program sits is following the completion of the youth talent program or through direct selection, and we'll show that shortly in the slide. Athletes will graduate from the youth talent program and then we'll given the opportunity to move up to the youth talent program as they transition through the pathway. So the talent pathway. So if you look at that, very much a philosophy is we've kind of gone away from the pyramid approach where we look at critical mass at the bottom and then we look at through selection with that the number of athletes that we engage with narrows as we get to the top. What we're trying to do is very much look at this, very much a box shaped where as we engage with athletes early through the youth talent program, we wish to continue to engage with them and retain communication and support through the pathway, nominally for 3 years. So you're looking at athletes who graduate from the youth program coming through. But getting onto the junior talent program, as you can see with the arrows, there are multiple entry points onto the program. To apply, there's an annual application. Even if you're on junior talent program, we're asking athletes to reapply each year as a form of review anyways. But with the youth talent program, there was a webinar. For any further information on the youth program, you can go to our website and revisit the webinar that was presented last week by my colleagues Nick Ridgeon, Dan Wagner and Andy Paul there. So athletes are on the youth program for 2 years. The idea with the junior program is to continue to engage and support those athletes for a further 3 years. So for those early years on the talent pathway, the idea is that we engage and communicate, support those athletes for up to 5 years. And hopefully that gives us enough time to develop, work with the potential of the athletes as they progress along the pathway. With those programs, it's really well aligned with the competition pathway, which is really critical to ensure that the competition focus is aligned at each stage of the athlete's career. So we can see there that the youth talent program, we're very much looking at supporting athletes and athletes with a focus around European under-18 championships or Commonwealth Youths. For those who go on to the top tier of the junior talent program, those would be individuals who are very much focusing on gaining selection at European under-20s and European under-23s. The senior program, as we go beyond that, will be those individuals who are focusing on Commonwealth Games focus as a primary. Those kind of early years on the senior talent program would be looking at under-23s as well. But as you can see with the arrows, there are multiple entry points, and we recognize that athletes develop at different rates. And so we recognize that there are late developers into the sport or athletes coming into the sport late in their career, and they can come in that way. Critical though to this are the clubs and the wider coaching community, where we're very much looking at identifying athletes from those environments, but also feeding back into those environments where athletes can, the best practice that we deliver in the talent program, those athletes and coaches going back and feeding that into the clubs and creating and sharing that knowledge and expertise throughout the pathway. So that's really important there. Yeah, so that's the talent pathway. Any questions on that we can come to at the end of the session. So in terms of identifying people, identifying athletes and their coaches onto the pathway, previously we very much looked at performance, how far they've jumped, how far they've thrown, how fast they've run. But going forward, it's very much looking at the athlete's potential and not just the performance to identifying athletes, and that would help shape the work and the potential that we can provide and the support and the value added that we can provide to the programs. So the potential area not just sits within the performance, in addition to time, distance, and height, etc., that we're very much looking at performance trajectories of athletes. What does that year-on-year progression look like? What does the age metrics look like in terms of where they sit in relation to their peers? And looking at event progression and competitiveness. How well did they compete at a championship, for example? Then there's the physical and technical elements, which we can look at the biomechanical, the physiological, and those technical metrics around that. But the other part is equally as important is the self and support, very much incorporating descriptions of best practice around lifestyle, performance behaviors, and we talk about the psychological characteristics of developing excellence, the PCDEs. These are very much performance behaviors that elite athletes display to get success. And then we look at within that, the environment. What does that athlete's environment look like? So from a coaching point of view, facilities, financial support, emotional support, and what does that support team look like around them? So very much we'd be looking at each of those areas to see how we can add value, educate and upskill the coach and athlete pair along that journey, and improve that potential for transitioning along the pathway. So the objectives of the program, as I mentioned, is essentially to provide support to the coach and athlete pair, to add value to the program and the plan, and to develop those competencies, the skills and abilities that we think are important to arm and prepare the athlete for senior success. And as we've just said in the previous slide, it's not just about performance, but we've got to look at the athlete from a holistic point of view, and looking at all the elements that can have an impact and an influence, positively or negatively, on the athlete. But equally, to ensure that they develop those life skills that will serve them well once they conclude their competing career, whatever trajectory they want to do. And that's where the transition is very much looking at how we can support that transition onto the next stage of the pathway, whether it's at Olympic level, Commonwealth level, or being a really high level, high performing club athlete at national competitions. Whatever that athlete's potential and desire is, we want to support them through that. And again, whether it's through education, further education, college, or into employment through apprenticeships, is to support them through that. Ultimately, we want the athlete and the coach to reach and maximize their potential at senior level, and retain them in the sport is really key from that point of view. Okay, next stage, delivery. So if you're successful onto the junior talent program, as I mentioned, the top tier earlier, because of the numbers, if we're looking at 220 athletes coming through the youth talent program every year, we're probably talking circa 400, 500 athletes at any one point through the junior program. And that's just not possible to be able to cater to every athlete and coach in the way that we wish to. So we're very much differentiating the level of support and delivery for the coach and an athlete on the junior program. So those in the top tier would be talent, and those are very much athletes who are targeting GB age groups under 20s and the 23s, or working towards that. And for those who are successful in the application through that, they'll be given a point of contact, and they'll go through an IEP, which we'll explain shortly as an individual athlete plan. There will be access to support services, and if you're linked to one of the two pilot hubs, whether it be Leeds or Birmingham, you'd have access to the support services there. And again, Jade will go into that more often later. But there will be camps. So in addition to operating out of those hub environments, so we would be running training camps, training weekends throughout the year, and we would be looking at on-camp support on that. Nick Ridgeon last year looked at physiotherapy and organised some drop-in sessions for that. So that's an example of what those support services may look like at a camp. We will be profiling, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but tracking progress. You know, how effective is your training program, from, you know, identifying your goals and have you achieved those goals, and are you on target for the long-term goals that you've identified. Within this, we have access to coaching networks, and it's very much around developing communities of practice. So coaches will have access to those communities of practice where coaches can share ideas, concepts, and grow knowledge through that way. Competition support, as mentioned earlier on the talent pathway, aligned with that, there's a competition pathway from a representative point of view. In addition to that, England will be offering international opportunities, both domestic and overseas. So we have Loughborough at the start of the year. We have Manchester International for seniors and under 20s next month in August. And we often take a contingent of small teams across to Europe over the indoor period. So there'll be competition support and opportunities through that. Again, there's coach support and mentoring. Those on the talent level will have access to one of the talent event leads in their event group area, where they can use as, you know, somebody to have a, you know, just to talk to, or it could be more formalized as a mentoring and looking at what are the priorities for that coach in relation to the needs of the athlete. And then we will be organizing training camps, which are very much around bringing like-minded athletes and coaches together, and maybe look at a little bit more of the technical elements and the performance conditioning elements of their event in relation to that event. And it's great to pull athletes together. And it's something that we're really looking forward to doing this year practically, rather than just spending loads of time online doing this. We talked about the differentiation level. The next tier would be national level, and that's athletes who are targeting England teams, internationals. And the regional level would be those who are very much targeting England championships, under 20 and under 23 championships. So based on the performance profiling and looking at the individual, we would look at through the application process, and then identify and allocate people in those areas. Within this as well, there's also GB Futures. So through this application process, we will be working closely with British Athletics to identify those who are most likely to make the world-class plan within a 3-4 year period. We would then communicate those individuals and recommend them for GB Futures program, and then it would go through that. So that's something where we are doing, we're working much closer with British Athletics to ensure that through this process coming out of the youth talent program, that we ensure that the athlete is on the right pathway and the right trajectory for them based on where they are and their potential. So profiling. So we talked about profiling. These are some of the areas that we looked at from an athlete point of view and a performance point of view. And again, some of these are very much linked to the slide previously, where we looked at the technical, tactical, and the self-help support, where we look at behaviors, and it's like PCDEs and nutrition, lifestyle, that kind of stuff. So very much looking at the person, individual, and how they focus, you know, looking at their life, education, that kind of stuff. The psychological characteristics of developing excellence, and have they got those competencies and skills that we're looking for. Capacity of the individual, looking at the injury history, relative age, and looking at their sporting training history. Because as I mentioned earlier, you could be an athlete that comes into the sport from, let's say, football or gymnastics, and so your training age in athletics is very young, but you've been competing in gymnastics for 10 years. And therefore, these are things that we would certainly consider. But this athlete profiling framework that we see in front of us is certainly being developed to provide clarity and guidance on the journey in becoming a successful senior international athlete. And it allows us to identify critical areas around where we can actually support where there may be some gaps. Lots of information on this slide, and I'll leave you guys. You can read the more of this stuff later on that. Profiling. So part of the one tool that we use to profile athletes is IEPs, which we talked about earlier. And if I can ask Jade just to explain a little bit more around this, around the purpose and the function of the IEPs, and Jade, how you use it in your role at the Birmingham Hub.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so the IAP, Individual Athlete Plan, I think is a great opportunity really for the coach and athletes to kind of sit down and discuss really what their setup looks like. And that's something that as a point of contact on the Talent Hub, you can kind of probe those questions a little bit to both the athlete and coach. And it just gives an opportunity to evaluate how their setup looks. It gives the athletes and coach the time to really identify and agree upon and establish some goals, not just for the season ahead, but really looking long term as well. And these are discussions sometimes that coaches and athletes don't always have, and I'd certainly encourage any kind of partnership to have those discussions anyway. But yeah, it helps to identify really where the plan is and what the plan should look like, and work on delivering on those goals that have been established. It also goes into a little bit of detail on exactly what the current setup looks like, kind of from the training environments, the facilities that you use, whether there are any additional support services involved in that setup or not. And there's no real right or wrong answers to those questions, but just it almost gives an overview of exactly what they have right now, and what that would want to be looking like in achieving those goals, either short term or long term. And it gives you the opportunity to really see what areas need that extra support. If you've got athletes that are susceptible to injury, whether adding a physio into that setup would be beneficial. And the point of contact really is there to ask these questions, and by the end of that IAP, you'll have that kind of go away and look over, and then later in the year, there's an opportunity to really reflect on kind of whether anything's changed, whether anything needs to change, whether there's any additions that need to be brought into the program or set up, or any that need to be taken away. So it really is for the athlete and coach to use for themselves as a tool to reflect on kind of how their setup is, and as the point of contact to just help establish what that should look like for them to really achieve kind of that performance level that they're striving for. Yeah, that's kind of the big overview of that. Excellent.
No, that's really good. And I like what you talked about there when we go through the IEP and it's having those discussions with the coach and athlete, and it's not, like you say, it's not a right or wrong answer. It's like what's happening today, and then where can we within the program or within the hub actually add value to what's already in place from that point of view. So it's not a kind of feel as if we're quizzing you and there's a right or wrong answer within that. So yeah. Cool. What does IEP look like? Just a quick, just a one slide of it. How many sections, Jade, are on the Birmingham IEP?
Yeah, there's probably about 4 or 5 sections. Kind of the beginning part really is establishing, what are the goals, short and long term, whether that's performance goals, reaching a certain performance, whether it's kind of looking to what competitions are coming up for the year ahead, you know, World Juniors, European Juniors, that kind of thing, and what it takes really to get to those competitions. You know, a lot of time I have sat down with coaching athletes and they're not actually sure what the qualifications are, and it just kind of brings to light those kind of questions that you really want to be kind of asking yourselves when sitting down and planning at the start of the year. So on the program, it would be something that would be done early on in the year before you even kind of approach that winter period of training, so that you know exactly the direction and the setup that you're looking for. And then it'll go into a little bit more detail on kind of your training environment, you know, kind of what's your facility like? Does it really meet the needs that you need for your event, kind of your training group, you know, and then it'll go into some kind of services, whether you have part of your kind of team, a physiotherapy, a nutritionist, some psychology support, physiology testing, that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong if the answer is no, because not everyone needs that kind of support. But it just allows us to identify whether it is something that needs adding in and whether we can support in that manner. So yeah, and it's really good just for the athlete and coach to have those discussions to really see what can be added and supported, or you know, what works really well and can be continued as is. Excellent.
So that kind of links us really nicely to you know, the talent hubs and their role within the junior talent program. The aim of this, you know, for us is to support athletes from that following the youth talent program through to their educational years if they go to university. The hub extends a little bit beyond that, looking over a 6-year period where it's supporting athletes up to the age of 23. Very much a pilot program that we're working just now to prove the concept. And then going forward, we'll see more of these rolled out, hopefully across the country. But the hub's in partnership with Leeds Beckett University, University of Birmingham, will aim to provide that environment where that supports elite training, education, and personal development for the athletes. Within that, there'll be individual coach support, access to training facilities, access to sports science and medicine specialists will be part of the pathway based on the needs of the athlete. So it's certainly not very much a sweetie shop where you go in there and you go, yep, I'll have a bit of everything, please. It will be very much based on the discussion that you have with Jade and her role at Birmingham, and looking at, right, what does the athlete need and what support does the coach need to help develop that athlete within that environment. And within this is the wider coach development and community club and school engagement are really integral as part of these, the hub aspirations, and the pilot program will, of the two hubs, will establish best practice. That's the aim of it. So Jade, you've covered some of the stuff around IEPs. Perhaps at this stage, you know, would you be able to share some of the work that you do? What does that look like? What does a typical day look like in the hub, or what does that role look like for you there for Birmingham?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Birmingham hub is based at the University of Birmingham. That's our lovely track there that you can see on screen. The track is on campus, but we also have a sports and fitness centre with a performance hub as part of that. So I guess kind of from a support point of view and those facilities that the hub offers, using Joel as the example, as I work very closely with Joel and Deirdre as their point of contact on the Birmingham hub. So Joel would have access to our university track. He will go into the S&C gym at the performance hub at the university, working closely with the practitioners that we have there. We have labs that he would have access to. And these things and the needs of the athlete and what the coach is after will come out in that IAP and those discussions through the IAP. So it will be established through that process whether there is anything that would be required from a lab and physiology point of view for the athlete. I know a lot of the track athletes will go into the lab and do their VO2 max testing and that kind of thing. Joel himself hasn't yet used the lab, but you know, those facilities are there, and it will be brought out in that IAP whether those are needed or not. And then as well as the university facilities, we do have access to the High Performance Centre as well across the city. So anyone on the Talent Hub, I know Joel frequently uses the indoor facility, certainly through those winter months as well. So it has the best of both, where it doesn't have any break between training, weather dependent. So, you know, there's some really great world-class facilities there for all the athletes to use. And there are designated hub slots as well that we have at the university track, and access to the High Performance Centre would be free of charge for those on the hub. So it just alleviates any of those barriers that may be put in place otherwise. Again, my role kind of as a point of contact really is just to support the coach and athlete pairing, and liaise with them and the support services that we have through physio, S&C, nutrition, to make sure that they're supported as they need. And it's not to say that they need everything. And it's not to say that if you've already got a setup that works well for you, that's outside of the practitioners that we have on the hub, that you can't still use those practitioners. You absolutely can. We just have these people in place in case, or if it's needed and works for your setup yourself. And obviously through the IAP, we'll go through that goal setting and establish kind of what the year is going to look like, what the goals for the year is. And then myself and Joel and Deirdre will catch up once a month, just to have a kind of debrief of how the training's going, how the month's been, whether there's been any competitions, just catching up on kind of injuries and general life. Joel has a part-time job as well as being an athlete, you know, and just kind of making sure that there's a good relationship there, that everyone knows exactly what's going on. And yeah, so we have a general catch up once a month. I generally see them at training anyway, so I'm fortunate to be able to kind of witness them in their element at training as well. So that's a really good opportunity for me, and the other athletes that I'm point of contact for as well train locally. So I'm fortunate that I can see and interact with them whilst they're training, and really kind of update and have that good communication, so that we're really on the same path and on that journey to reaching those goals. I mean, success to Joel and Deirdre. Their goal for the year was to go to European under-23s, and they were successful in that. So, you know, everything that they've put together and have been supported with has really kind of turned things around for them. There were a few things missing from their current setup that got brought in and has really taken off and really pushed kind of him through that, you know, that next level of his development as an athlete. I know I've touched a little bit on those services, but they do include S&C, physiotherapy, nutrition, psychology, physiology, and they are all based at the University Performance Hub. All those practitioners, they're very close knit. So, you know, Joel has his S&C coach taught to the physio, so they know exactly how things are progressing, what needs to be added, and there's a good communication there with the coach as well, which is really important. So that kind of team of people come together and it really kind of works for best practice, which is really good. I guess something that we've touched on previously in the slides as well is that coach network. So all the coaches on the hub are invited to coach workshops, and it's really just to share ideas and bring in, you know, coaches together. And those workshops are both the Birmingham hub and Leeds hub brought together. The coaches are all invited, and it's a mix of endurance, throws, sprints, jumps, all come together and we break out into groups and have discussions. And it's a great opportunity to share ideas, learn about what's to come for the season. I think earlier this year we had a workshop on entry standards or competition standards for age group champs, Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, and it was information that not everyone knew before that session, and everyone actually took something away from that. So, it's really good to kind of integrate those coaches into the conversations as well. It's not all just about the athletes and the individual, it's about the athlete and coach pairing and that community of working together. And then the last thing really is kind of workshops that we put on. So the practitioners that we have on board, we come together and discuss really what would be most appropriate for the athletes at that time, and bring about a topic for a workshop. This year, with obviously COVID that was going on, we came up with the idea of doing a workshop on kind of the immune system and how that affects performance and athletes, and then how they can best build up their immune system and work through that. So the kind of science and the physiology behind that. And it was really informative for athletes who had probably had COVID and suffered quite badly for it, and those who were trying to prevent catching COVID, and how best to kind of support the immune system through that way. So, the topics that come up that we want to put on for the workshops are very much developed through kind of conversations with the athletes and coaches to see really what is of interest and what they really want to know a little bit more about. So it's very tailored towards the athlete and coach that we have within the hub. So yeah, I mean, obviously Deirdre there has put a bit of a comment on how it's benefited her and Joel, and I think it's kind of testament to the work that goes on in trying to create a unity in what's going on for the athlete, and bringing all those practitioners and services and support, and alleviating any kind of barriers that may be in the way for the athletes. And it certainly paid off and worked very well for Joel and Deirdre in this case.
No, absolutely. Jay, that was an excellent, I was going to say overview, but there was a lot of detail in there as well around the work that you do. And it's, really impressive just to hear that as well. And the idea within Hub, we create those environments across the country and for coaches and athletes to have access to that expertise. But just listening to the amount of work that you guys are doing is great to hear. So thank you. So how do we get onto the program? Eligibility. First of all, you need to be able to represent England, eligible to represent England at the Commonwealth Games from a nationality perspective, and hold a British passport, and eligible to compete for Great Britain and Northern Ireland at international major championships, Olympics, Paralympics. For this year's cohort, very much athletes looking at 1st of January 2000 to 31st of August 2003. For those who missed the application process for the Youth Talent Programme last year or unsuccessful, we are aware there's a kind of almost a year gap between I've missed the boat on the Youth Talent Programme, but I'm too young for the Junior Talent Programme, and I'm sitting in limbo a little bit. If you sit within that criteria or that category, can I ask you to contact your event group lead, and they'll be able to advise you accordingly, and whether they advise you to apply through the junior program, or they may identify to say the regional training program, the training days may be best suited. But if you are in this situation, I can ask you to contact your respective event group lead. For jumps and combined events, that's me. For speed, that's Shani Palmer. For throws, that's Nick Ridgeon. And for endurance, that's Spencer Duval. In terms of criteria, we're looking at athletes who have graduated from the Youth Talent Programme, as we've said before. Those who have not been in the programme previously, but their profile, their performance profile, and individual profile meets for the event, we would look at that criteria. And further on, athletes and coaches will be expected to commit to the programme, and consideration will be given to the evidence submitted in the application and details provided. Selection process, there will be an athlete and coach application, so it's not just the athlete who are applying for the programme, it's both coach and athlete. So there will be an element in the section looking at coach information, but also a statement, a support statement from the coach. Selection panel will come together. That consists of the event group leads and the talent event leads that support the EGLs there. And Dan Wagner will be there as well as BA Olympic Pathway manager there. There'll be a selection confirmation followed up with an induction with either a talent event lead, or if you're moving into that hub environment, the induction will be with leads or Birmingham's point of contacts. That could be, if you're successful on the Birmingham programme, and could be a jumper, then your point of contact could well be Jade, and going through that IEP with you. Timelines wise, applications will open for this on the 9th of August. And for those who, and even those who are currently operating within the hub, the athletes apply every year as well. So they'll be going through this process. But previously we had 3 different application processes, one for the hub, one for junior talent program, and one for futures. And what happened was, you know, from a communication point of view to the coach and athlete, it wasn't efficient, it wasn't effective. So we've aligned the application process. We encourage everyone to apply. And then as part of this, we just, if you're going to be aiming to or currently working out of the Leeds or Birmingham hub, we just encourage you just to identify that within the application form, and that will get picked up by those environments. Applications close on the 6th of September. We will be meeting the week commencing the 20th of September to look at all the programs. So looking at futures, looking at the junior program, and looking at those who would be going to the Leeds and Birmingham hubs. So we'll be pulling that information together, and then the outcome, the athlete and coach would be informed accordingly of the outcome of that. Hub inductions would take place at the moment. We're looking at 1st of October. As soon as selections confirmed, that induction will take place, so that it aligns with the start of term for the students, with IEPs and training days taking place thereafter. World-class program confirmation selection will take place November, December. And we have a number of training days already planned in the program. So these will be December time and March for those national and regional training days. Application form split into 3 sections. We'll be looking at personal and contact information, competition and training information, looking at your competition history, your training history, what other sports have you done, injury history, that kind of stuff. And then looking at personal goals and a coaching statement from that. Those personal goals, those process goals are going to be really key. So if you're successful onto the program, they will form part of that discussion with the IEP that Jade talked about earlier, identifying those short-term, medium, long-term goals as part of your plan.